It all started on a rainy Tuesday evening in our small two-bedroom apartment near campus. I'm Alex, a junior studying literature, and for the past year and a half, I've been sharing this space with Mike, a physical therapy major I met through the university's roommate matching program. We weren't exactly friends before moving in together, just two guys who needed affordable housing and seemed compatible enough on paper. Mike is what you might call a typical college guy. Athletic, sociable, always planning the next weekend hangout with his teammates from the lacrosse team. He's the kind of person who fills a room with energy, while I've always been more reserved, preferring quiet evenings with a good book or writing in my journal. Speaking of my journal, that leather-bound book has been my constant companion since high school. It's where I process my thoughts, work through my feelings, and most importantly, where I've documented my journey of self-discovery. You see, coming to terms with my sexuality hasn't been easy. Growing up in a small conservative town didn't exactly provide a supportive environment for questioning. And even in college, I've been cautious about who I share this part of myself with. My journal became my safe space, the one place I could be completely honest without fear of judgment or rejection. Let me paint the picture of that Tuesday evening more clearly. I had an evening class that ran late, and by the time I got home, I was soaked from the downpour. Mike was sprawled on the couch watching highlights from some game, a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table. We exchanged our usual greetings, and I headed to my room to change into dry clothes. That's when I noticed something was off. My desk, usually organized in my own particular way, looked slightly different. The stack of books had been shifted, and my journal, which I normally kept in the second drawer, was sitting on top of the desk, slightly askew. My heart immediately started racing. Had Mike been in my room? Had he read my journal? The thought made me feel physically ill. Those pages contained my most private thoughts, including entries about my attraction to men, my crush on a guy in my literature class, and even some conflicted feelings I'd had about Mike himself. Not romantic ones, but admiration for his easy confidence and comfort in his own skin. Things I wasn't ready to share with anyone, let alone my straight, somewhat traditional roommate. I tried to calm myself down, thinking maybe I'd left the journal out by mistake that morning. I had been writing in it before rushing to my 8 a.m. class. But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that I'd put it away. I always put it away. It was a habit born from years of protecting my privacy. For the next few days, I became hyper-aware of every interaction with Mike. Was he looking at me differently? His usual fist bump when passing in the hallway seemed hesitant. When we were both in the kitchen making dinner, the comfortable silence we developed felt strained. He asked about my day, but avoided eye contact. Small things that might mean nothing, but to my anxious mind, they confirmed my worst fears. He had read my journal and was uncomfortable with what he'd learned. The tension was unbearable. I started spending more time at the library, coming home only when I thought Mike would be at practice or out with friends. I even considered looking for a new living situation, though the thought of breaking our lease and finding a new place mid-semester seemed impossible. The journal remained untouched in my locked desk drawer. I couldn't bring myself to write in it anymore, feeling as though my sanctuary had been violated. A week passed like this, with growing discomfort between us. Then came Friday night. I had assumed Mike would be out with his teammates as usual, so I planned a quiet evening at home. I was sitting on the couch with a bowl of ramen and a novel when the door opened, and Mike walked in. He hesitated when he saw me, then took a deep breath and sat down in the armchair across from me. "Hey, Alex, can we talk?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically serious. My stomach dropped. This was it, the confrontation I'd been dreading and avoiding. I nodded, unable to form words as my throat tightened with anxiety. "I need to apologize to you," Mike began, surprising me. "Last week, I was looking for that economics textbook you borrowed, and I went into your room. I know I should have texted you first, but you were in class, and I had a study group waiting." He paused, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd rarely seen from him. "Your journal was open on your desk, and I saw my name. I didn't mean to read it, but once I saw my name, I couldn't stop. I read a couple of pages." His voice grew quieter. "I know it was a massive invasion of your privacy, and I've been feeling terrible about it all week." The confirmation of my fears sent a wave of heat through my body. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I'd never wanted to be. But there was something in Mike's tone that didn't match the disgust or judgment I'd been expecting. "How much did you read?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Enough to understand, he replied, finally meeting my eyes. Enough to know that you've been carrying this weight alone for a long time. And enough to realize I haven't been the kind of roommate or friend who made you feel safe sharing that with me. His response caught me completely off guard. Where was the awkwardness? The discomfort? The request for me to move out? You're not weirded out? I asked cautiously. Mike shook his head. I was surprised, sure. But weirded out? No. What I read made me think a lot about how little I actually know about what you've been going through. And it made me wonder why you felt you couldn't tell me. Let me explain why this moment mattered so much. When you've spent years hiding a part of yourself, anticipating rejection becomes second nature. You prepare for the worst reactions, armor yourself against potential hurt. What you don't prepare for is acceptance coming from unexpected places. Mike's response cracked something open in me, a possibility that I had underestimated not just him, but maybe others in my life too. It's not about you specifically, I found myself explaining. It's about experiences I've had before, comments I've heard you and your friends make, not realizing how they might affect someone like me. It's easier to keep things to myself than risk losing the comfortable dynamic we have. Mike nodded slowly, taking this in. I get that. And I'm sorry if I've ever said anything that made you feel you couldn't be yourself around me. That's on me, not you. The conversation that followed lasted hours. We talked more openly than we ever had before. Mike asked questions about my journey, not from a place of judgment, but genuine curiosity. He admitted his ignorance about many LGBTQ+ issues and acknowledged some of the problematic language he'd used without thinking. I shared stories from high school, the isolation I'd felt, and my cautious steps toward embracing my identity in college. You know what I realized after reading your journal? Mike said as our conversation wound down around 2 a.m. You wrote that you admired how comfortable I am with myself, how confident. But the truth is, you're braver than I've ever had to be. I've never had to question whether people would accept me for who I am. I've never had to carefully consider who I can trust with the truth. His words hit me hard. I'd never thought about my journey in terms of courage before. I'd seen it as necessity, as survival, but not as something admirable. In the weeks that followed, our relationship shifted in ways I never expected. Mike became more thoughtful about the language he used, not just around me, but in general. He called out his teammates when they made homophobic jokes during practices. He asked if I wanted to join him and his friends for drinks sometimes, making a genuine effort to integrate our social circles. One particularly meaningful moment came about a month after our conversation. I was getting ready for a date, my first real date with a guy since coming to college, and was clearly nervous. Mike noticed as I changed shirts for the third time. The blue one looks best, he offered from my doorway. Brings out your eyes. When I looked at him in surprise, he shrugged. What? I can have opinions on fashion. Besides, this guy would be lucky to date you, Alex. Don't be nervous. That simple vote of confidence meant everything. It normalized something that had felt so fraught with tension for so long. It was just a roommate helping a roommate before a date, the kind of interaction I'd seen countless times between straight friends, but had never imagined experiencing myself. The most profound change, though, was within me. Having Mike accept this part of me, without hesitation, created a ripple effect of courage. I came out to my close friends, then to my sister, and eventually to my parents. Not every reaction was as positive as Mike's, but having that first experience of unconditional acceptance gave me strength to weather the more difficult conversations. I started writing in my journal again, but with less fear and more hope. The entries became less about hiding and more about growing, exploring, and embracing all parts of myself. And sometimes, I'd share certain thoughts with Mike directly instead of just committing them to paper. About 6 months after he found my journal, Mike and I were helping a mutual friend move into a new apartment. As we carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs, the friend complained about having to live with a stranger since his original roommate had backed out. Just make sure you don't read his journal, Mike joked, shooting me a grin. Inside joke, he explained to our confused friend. Then, more seriously, but for real, the random roommate thing worked out pretty well for me. Got me one of my best friends. Best friends. It wasn't a label I'd ever expected for us when we first signed that lease agreement as convenient strangers. But looking back, that invasion of privacy, though wrong and initially terrifying, had broken down walls between us that might have otherwise remained standing indefinitely. I don't recommend having your personal journal read as a coming out strategy, but I do believe in the power of vulnerability, whether chosen or thrust upon us, to create deeper connections than we might think possible. And I believe in giving people the chance to surprise you with their capacity for growth and acceptance. Mike and I lived together until graduation, and even now, years later, we remain close friends. He was a groomsman at my wedding, standing proudly beside me as I married the man I love. Sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones we least expect to look in our direction. And sometimes being seen, truly seen, is exactly what we need to finally see ourselves. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that authenticity, while frightening, opens doors to connections that staying hidden never could. My journal once held secrets I thought would end friendships if discovered. Instead, being inadvertently honest created the space for one of the most meaningful friendships of my life. And that has made all the difference. For anyone hiding parts of themselves out of fear, I won't tell you that every revelation will be met with acceptance. But I will say that the possibility of finding understanding in unexpected places exists. And sometimes, the people who initially look at you differently after learning your truth are simply seeing you more completely than they ever had before. And that kind of seeing can be the beginning of something beautiful. Total_char_count, 13,098.